Hi, Jaimie.
Hello.
How are you doing? I'm so flattered, honored, and freaked out to have you because I spend a lot of time stalking you, so to speak. No, but
Okay.
no, because I love your podcast, Strictly Stalking. And the more I looked into you, the more I love the way you use this true crime genre, which is like taken off like wildfire. Although I grew up watching Snap, so I know this isn't new, but you
I
do.
love Snapped.
I love Snap. I still do. There's a great episode with Leanne Rydell who accidentally shot the wrong man, and like it starts off with the picture that was clearly taken at Disney World's like Wild West, and like she's got like a rifle to like a shotgun to his neck, and it's black and white. And I'm like, that was the most tasteless thing I've ever seen. Oh, way to go, Oxygen.
Great. Great.
So tell us about your podcast and how it came to be.
Well,
sorry, I can tell if you want.
No. So I have a business partner and co-host, Jake Deptula, and we met on the set of a feature film that we were doing for Lifetime. I'm a casting director and he's a producer. And I visited the set at one point, and we just kind of hit it off. I don't know how we started talking about it, but we started talking about true crime and serial killers. And so then the next time I saw him, I happened to get a package of serial killer coloring books. So I brought him one, and he was like,
this serial killer
Amazon, you know.
Yeah.
So I brought him one, and I was like, hey, thought you might like this. Here's a little gift. You know, I like to give gifts to my producers. They keep hiring me, hopefully. Yeah. And we just like hit it off. We're great friends. So we started talking about projects we were thinking of doing and things we wanted to do, and it was all centered around true crime. So we decided to start a company with ourselves, hoping to like produce films and do those kinds of things. And I listened to a ton of podcasts. I love the podcasts. And
by the way, just to plug, the company is called Creative Depraved.
Yep, Creative Depraved. And yeah, so I called him one day because I'm very like, fly away. Like, I know, think before you do things, like we have a joke where like, if we're walking in the forest and there's a pool, I'm just going to jump in and Jake's going to see if there's water first, so like, that's just kind of our dynamic. So I called him and I was all like mad and like kind of bitchy. And I'm like, I want to do a podcast and everyone's taking all the good podcasts. Like there's no murders left for me. And he's just like, and he's so logical and like, no matter what I say, he never like strays from just being completely normal. Like it's so weird.
My husband's like that. It's really fucking annoying. Yeah.
Right. I'm just like I could call him and be like, I killed someone. We need to hide the body. He'd be like, okay, Jaimie. Like it would just be like that. Like you.
Wait, but you don't already know where you would like.
No, I do. I've got ideas. Okay. So I called him. I was like, I really want to do a podcast. Everyone's doing what I want to do. All the good murders are taken. And he's like, okay, well, no one's doing a podcast about stalking. And I'm like, I don't know anything about stalking, dude. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, hang up on him. Like, that's dumb. I'm not going to do that. And hang up on him. And then I sit there because this is what always happens with my conversation with Jake. Then I sit there and think about what he said. I'm like, shit, he's fucking right again. So I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I don't know anything about stalking. Like there's a whole entire crime that like, I don't know anything about. So that's interesting. So I started researching it and it kind of turned into like something else where I'm reading about these people, like the things that people go through when they're being stalked and like no one's helping them. Like the laws aren't helping, nothing. No one is out there. They just have to like live like this. Yeah. A lot of times, like there's just nothing to help them. And it's insane. So that's within a couple of days, we signed with Cast Media with our idea. And we just kind of went from there and, so glad we did too, because, then COVID hit.
I didn't realize that. I was like, holy, so my first book was released March 18th, 2020, it didn't do so hot. Needless to say, it was how to be happy. It's succinct term. No one wants to be fucking happy. And so I was like, crash. And so when I was reading an article, I was like, fuck, they launched at the same time. But
yeah,
I was listening to podcasts like crazy during COVID.
Everybody was. So, I mean, we lucked out with that. We really did. And then, we just approaching, we just hit 5 million downloads, which is awesome. We're super proud of that. And, we haven't taken it. We've done one a week since January 2020, and it's been kind of an amazing ride. And now we're really trying to make real changes. In the stalking world, I guess, we're trying to, get help for people. It's not just, a lot of times people come to us and, maybe for one reason or another, they don't want to be on the show, which is completely understandable. We work with them, we help them behind the scenes, just try to get out of their situation, try to get help for what they're going through. It's not easy.
No. So, do you approach, I mean, I imagine when it started, you approached the women that are on your show.
It's funny. Jake has a way with women. He's very soothing and compassionate, and like people like kind of congregate to him, where I think I'm not a cold person or like less compassionate. It's just I think I kind of get like triggered by things easier than Jake does. And so when I get triggered by certain things, I kind of shut down, which I'm working on. But like, especially, we have a lot of people that come forward to tell their stalking story, and there's like a lot of domestic abuse involved in that. And so like, for me, that's a very close subject because I've also been involved in that, with my last boyfriend. I don't know if I should say I'm my last boyfriend, but whatever. And so it's, it's difficult to hear those things. So actually Jake comes across more because he is so like even keel, where I'll either freak out a little or shut down a little, or, so it's interesting. But Jake is actually more of the person that talks to people, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I'm a psychologist, and I go through phases, but there was a while where I was working a lot with suicidal teenagers. And part of the reason is I have a family member who has a history of multiple failed attempts. Fortunately, they're very bad at it but it's something that I've grown up with. And so hearing the words is sort of like, I don't get triggered anymore. I just get like, okay, let's go into this. And in theory, every therapist should be trained like that. But when I started, I was never going to work with anyone suicidal,
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, like how much doing the podcast has helped me personally on that level, because, my relationship actually ended right before the podcast came out, which is great. It was great for me. And so like at first, like some of those first episodes, I just felt like dizzy. To be honest, when they're explaining, they're saying, and then he did this, I'm just like, fuck, I know.
Right.
But I didn't feel, comfortable enough to like speak out. And, I've only started speaking out about my own things, in the past few months, actually. So, but I think it's from the podcast, domestic abuse and stalking often go hand in hand.
I agree. Okay, and you please say no to anything. Can I ask how long you were with the person?
6 years.
Holy
6 years. Yeah, it was a very long relationship.
Can I ask what finally gave you the courage to leave?
Yeah, I just left one day. Well, I mean, here's the thing.
That's actually a fair answer, but because it involves a lot of unpacking, and I only want you to unpack as much as you're comfortable with.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I actually left many times, as most people do.
Yeah.
And then, it's a cycle. You get sucked right back in. And there's no shame in that. It's very hard to leave a toxic relationship. Any type of toxic relationship, it's very hard to leave. You get confusing, and it's, there's a lot in play. And when I finally left, I left. Like it was you know, when I finally did it, it wasn't that bad, to be honest. I mean, for me, which for a lot of women, that's the start of something much worse. So I was really, really, really lucky. And you know, no contact. It was just a straight cut. It was kind of amazing.
It's kind of amazing. And it makes me sort of, having watched a lot of Lifetime movies, it makes me somewhat, you know, nervous, but happy that this is how.
Well, a lot of times people like that, you know, if they don't stick around, they move on to their next person. And a lot of times they already have somebody in mind. So he actually moved out of my house and into someone else's house, from what I understand. So I kind of, that it made sense to me. That
it makes sense to me also. I feel badly for the other person, and you know, but I also think even if you had warned that, they wouldn't have believed it.
Never.
No,
well, I mean, you know, when you're in that situation, you get very good at hiding everything.
I agree.
I was extremely good. We went to a film festival once, and we stayed in a house with a group of our friends, and we had a pretty epic argument, we'll say, and no one knew. The music was on. No one knew, you know, and I'm very quiet. I'm not going to say anything. So, you know, like, and it's just, you know, people, you get really good at disguising things, and then you start to feel a little crazy. So, you know, there's a lot of correlation there with that and with stalking.
Right. And I also think it's no one knew, or no one knew how to handle it, because, you know, but, so this is a bizarre comparison, but again, my science research brain. So, you know, you could, like, if you train a rat to push a lever and then you give him a pellet every time he pushes it, when you stop giving the pellets, it's called an extinction rate. That rat loses interest immediately. If it's like every 5 times, they'll keep pushing it because they figured it out. There's something called an intermittent rate of reinforcement, where you just randomly give them the pellet when they push the lever. And that's actually, I heard this my sophomore year of college, and stuck with me. That's why people stay in shitty relationships, because you never know when the good's gonna occur, you know.
And the good does happen. I mean, it's not bad all the time. Like, we had some amazing times, and it was always followed by something shitty, you know, or the shitty times are always followed by something amazing. So, you know, overall, it's just, it was super toxic, you know, and I wish the best for that person.
Let's just say you wish the best. But the truth is, on the upside,
I wish the best for people of the world.
Okay, fine. World peace for everyone. I just think it's awesome that, like, I do think a part of your past has led you to this, and has led you to be, you know, to relate. And there's definitely certain episodes. I sound like the biggest creepster. I've not listened to every episode, but since you said yes, I have upped my ante, you know? But so I definitely hear you sometimes speaking more, sometimes speaking less. I want you to speak more, because I love it when you know, Jake is fantastic too. But also, as we discussed before, like, we like 2 people podcasts because it's 2 people sharing. You know, I'm with you. I'm impulsive as well. And
I'm very impulsive.
This podcast started because one of my very good friends and I were at a park, cracking each other up, and someone goes, "You should start a podcast." And like a week later, we whipped out our phone, no audio, like, worst ever. And then started having guests, and like our 3rd guest was like, her name's Gina. She's like, "So have you guys ever heard of audio?" You know, like, we were like, nope, you know, like, what is that, you know?
It's a crazy learning. The podcasting is a crazy learning process. Like, we're really lucky to team up with Cast Media, because they help us a lot. Obviously, I had no idea how to do a podcast when I first started. Like, me and Jake were like, we're just gonna like record some shit, and I'm like, no. Cass was like, no, we need like a format, we need like this and that. We're like, oh shit, this is the real deal.
I mean, I left out my new podcast, Crimes of Long Island podcast. He does a lot of podcasts, and he actually has a very successful Little House on the Prairie podcast. Nice. The first time we worked together, apparently there's an episode where one of the characters gets raped by a mime, and that he asked me to co-host with him. It's weird as fuck. but that was how we worked together. And then 2 years later, this came into place, but he does all of that. So I just show up. No, I just do a lot of research and show up. So
I love it.
Yeah,
Cass does a lot for us.
Listen, I'm jealous. And I also think I feel like you have a limited number of commercials, right?
I mean, we have hopefully a few every episode. That's obviously what keeps us going as you know, what I didn't know is that podcasting is, it's really time consuming. Especially, we have a lot of meetings and phone calls with our guests, like sometimes 3 or 4 meetings and phone calls before they come on the show. Because we need them to be comfortable. We need to know, like, and a lot of our guests are anonymous for their safety, but we need them to be comfortable. We want them to be able to tell their story in a way that not only are they comfortable with, but it's, concise, and there's a timeline, because stalking is so confusing. Like every story is like, and then this happened over here, and then this happened, and we're trying to put it into a timeline. It's not easy for people who aren't used to telling this story. Like this is a lot of times the first time they've told the story too, is on our podcast. So it's not an easy thing for them to do. Sometimes they get emotional. We stop for a while. There's a lot more than I realized that goes into it.
Right.
In order to put this together. So yeah, I'm hoping we have like at least a few commercials every episode.
But I like the way you don't have too many, because I will tell you, first of all, every podcast has the same advertisers.
I know.
And it's also like, with very few exceptions, but considering like the serious tone you guys take and the good work you do, like, I like the fact that I'm not suddenly jarred out to talk about, Daily Harvest every 5 minutes or whatever.
Oh, Daily Harvest. I love them.
And it's fun. It's not against them. It's just that, like, you really treat this with the respect it deserves.
I get it. Well, and we've been trying to, so I write all of our commercials, all of our ads. So we've been trying to put like our personality into the ads, because we don't put them into the show. We don't put our personality in the show as much. And so if you listen to the commercials, I feel like they've really been getting better and better, but now they're starting to tell kind of a story of our lives. Like with the two of us, like, kind of cliche story, like I'm always on vacation. I'm always in my bikini and drinking wine, which is,
I did hear that a little bit true. And I was like, a little bit true though. Bikini and wine, but I'm fine with it. So,
it is a little bit true. I'm not going to lie,
it's like nice. It gives people an insight. It's not just,
and Jake, I don't want to call him boring. Jake is the most even person I've ever met. Jake is like, he doesn't really drink. He doesn't really, eat bad things. He's just living his best life in a totally opposite way of me. And so I try and kind of interweave that through our ads, because it's the only place where people could get to know us right now,
Right now. I mean, the truth is, I guess in theory, you could bring out more of you guys in talking with the guests, but it's about their stories, as you said.
Yeah. Well, and my personality, like I like to laugh a lot. I like to laugh at inappropriate times as well.
So do I. Yeah.
I get nervous. I laugh. That doesn't come across well when someone's like crying or talking about domestic violence. I start laughing. Like, it's not because it's funny. It's because I'm nervous, and it's hard to control random emotions sometimes,
It's also, it does feel, the stalking part does feel a little hopeless and helpless sometimes.
It does. It's like, there's so much sometimes going through my mind while we're doing these interviews, and that, like for me, like, it's just hard to even, like, I'm just trying to stay focused on like not saying something stupid, really, because that's like kind of my MO sometimes, like I get nervous, or I get like, if there's too many emotions in the room, I'm like, I don't know what to do, So, but since doing the podcast, I think that I've changed a lot in that, and we are starting to like relax more. I don't want to like mess someone else up. Like, I don't want to say something, when someone's telling their story and it's traumatic, and, they've gone through this, and I don't want to be like, oh, so why is this? I don't want to ask something that would be, taken the wrong way, or, I just want to be really careful with people. And so does Jake. And that's why it's their story.
I think it's lovely. Again, I'm a shrink, so I have to ask all the shit in the world, like,
oh yeah.
And so, and also every guest is different. And again, this August 10th episode, the person's name in quotes is Sally. And, she was it was a weird story. You guys, you should totally listen to it. Not in weird and bad way, but it's very interesting and odd. And I don't think I recommend handling a stalker like that, but
it's controversial.
Right. Just to be clear, do you want to tell them what Sally
Yeah, for sure. And we don't give our opinions on the stalking stories.
No.
We like to tell people how, well, you can't avoid a stalker necessarily, but how to get help if you're going through situations, and maybe how to see the red flags ahead of time, things like that. But so for this story, she was being stalked. There were definitely stalking tendencies in her relationship. And the stalking was escalating. The relationship was toxic. So they broke up. And after the breakup, he did sexually assault her. And instead of going to the police, she told him to go get therapy and to see what the therapist said. And
also to see if he still thought that she was the right one after therapy, then they would talk.
Right. And we did get kind of like a lot of people were concerned about this episode, rightfully so. And I do agree with the concern. Sally was very young when this happened. And hindsight is 20. If you're listening to someone else's story, you can be like, oh, well, I would have done this. I would have done. Sure. We all would have done something different. Like every one of my friends is like, I can't believe you stayed with your ex for 6 years. Like I would have left after the first time he X, Y, or Z, And I'm like, oh, like I didn't really see it that so you don't know what you would have done in the situation.
Yeah.
And we tried for this story, we talked to Sally a lot about this. And we tried to, she realizes, and I think she said, in there, like she would definitely have gone to the police now. Like, what was she thinking? Like, of course she would have gone to the police. The most controversial part then is that after the therapy, she did become friends with him, our acquaintances and friends. That is unusual.
Right.
That's
extremely unusual. I'm not judging Sally because frankly, when I was listening to it, I was just like, dear Lord, I wouldn't mind being that therapist because I sure as shit would put this man, but also like, I hope that he went to a good therapist but Sally is someone who I think you could have played with more because it wasn't traumatic and she sounds like she's in a good place. And like, if there's, I don't know. And so she sounds,
it's interesting. I think everybody should try therapy at least a few times in their life. I love therapy. I think it's amazing. And so I think for, anybody that's a victim of sexual assault, therapy is definitely the way to go. Just kind of things like that. I think, if she's okay with how things turned out, then I think that's great. Like
I'm not anti-Sally. I'm not at all. I'm just saying like she clearly had some spunk to her. And I think that, that's one of this, what I was like listening to this morning. I was like, Jaimie, talk to her,
it was an interesting episode.
I know.
And we edited a lot of things that me and Jake said out of there because we decided we don't want to give any opinion on it because we know it's controversial, but we also, if everyone turns out okay per se, I guess. But of course we wanted to like really make sure that like, if you're sexually assaulted, if you're being stalked, go to the authorities. Like it's one in a gazillion chances where you would be friends with your stalker later or that they would even go get therapy. And I think we are really trying to show like, oh, like this person got therapy and maybe they actually got better. Like maybe that's a thing. Cause we talk about like, oh, I wish the stalker would go get therapy, but we don't talk about, did the stalker go get therapy and what happened? We've never been able to approach that because we don't talk to stalkers ever.
Right. And listen, I mean, I think it's I think yours is one of a handful of platforms that really considers what's their story first. Like that is your primary premise. And then I had mentioned before your, on your Instagram and your link tree, you really, I wrote this morning, so now I'm reading it, but like I wrote, uses her platform to bring awareness to stalking awareness, victim abuse support, domestic violence. Like you have so many links, Black Lives Matter, stand-up resources, training for first responders and victim services providers. Like you are doing great shit, assuming people are smart enough to look past the hot bikini and click on the link tree. But I love that it's a podcast, but it's a podcast with a purpose,
Yeah. We want to make changes. And it didn't start like that. It started out like, okay, cool. Like, let's do this podcast. And then all of a sudden we were in this world. I mean, it's such a tight knit community. It's an unfortunate community that, you don't want to be in it. Like these people, they don't want to be in this community where, oh, you've been stalked too. And it's crazy because, guests of ours have reached out to each other. And they all talk now. Like they're like, it's literally, we've developed like a community.
But that's wonderful. You've made them.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Like, it's sad that it even has to be like that, but so great that we can give that to people. Cause there's so many people suffering in absolute silence, completely alone, isolated,
And also you started filming, you aired right before the pandemic. So especially they needed this, They
really did. Well, and it's so isolating to be a victim of a crime, any type of crime. It's very isolating. Like they say when you're like, I don't say complaining about something, when you're talking about something negative or upsetting, people will listen an average of 3 times and then they tune you out. So like for example, I was in a toxic, very bad relationship. And I would tell my friends, oh, like he did this. And they, after a few times, they're like, okay, like not to be mean, but you can only hear so much. You only take so much. And so that's why I think these crimes are so isolating, because after a while, people, they don't understand it. It's so hard to understand unless you're in it.
Right. And now you've given these women a community. I'm saying women. Have there been any men interviewed so far?
There have. There've been a few men. I think, men don't come forward as much. And more women do get stalked. And, men are very victim blamed when they're stalked. We've had guys on there where the cops will be like, well, what'd you do to her?
Yeah.
Like nothing, like you're just stalking me, or like, oh, like you must have broken her heart, so that's why she's stalking you. For people who weren't even in a relationship with their stalker, like people just don't understand how a female can stalk a male. Or also we've had men stalking men, and that's a whole nother thing, like especially if it's within the LGBTQ plus community. Cops don't take that seriously at all. No. They think it's like some funny, joke. It's very hard to get help sometimes. And it's not all the time. I don't want to cop bash at all, because there's so many great ones out there that really, really, really help. And I've been there for a lot of our survivors. But there's some, that aren't, and it's not necessarily their fault. They're just not trained correctly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm not blaming cops in this particular arena for, we're on the same page there, but, I wanted to look up stats, and I did, of like, repeated, people. So if I could go back in time and do my graduate school education all over, I would make like my goal to find out, like people who are, abused, it's usually sexually, emotionally, whatever, it often happens more than once, or if you're raped, or like, there's this, it's recidivism. That's why I didn't want to say it, because I was like struggling.
It's same with stalking.
It is. And so I did a lot of research, and it's, I have a bunch of random stats, which I'll, give you, but it's so important. Like, a 2003 study followed 148 stalking and harassment offenders. They were court ordered to undergo a mental health eval and followed up for between 2.5 to 13 years. Guess what percentage reoffended within the first year?
Oh, all of them.
Close, 80%. And that's just
only 8. I'm actually surprised that's only 80.
Only 80. I know.
Is it after they started getting help?
Yeah, but I mean, help takes time.
Oh, it takes a long time for stalk. I mean, we had one woman on there that was stalked for 40 years.
Oh my God.
The guy was 70 years old when he finally stopped, and they were in court. He was 70. Like, what?
That is insane.
It's an obsession. You can't stop. It's a problem.
It's a problem. It's a serious problem. During a 12-month period of time, 14 of every 1,000 people 18 and older were victims of stalking. 46% experienced at least one unwanted contact per week. 11% have been stalked for 5 years or more.
Yeah. It's a long process for a lot of people. You know what else that we found interesting, just with who we've talked to, I think we've done like 82 episodes now, is that a lot of people that have been stalked have also been stalked by more than one person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's one of the more
confusing.
Like, how does that happen?
What I started looking into. Yeah. Because I was curious about it, and it does happen. And there's no guilt or blame being assigned here by either one of us. It's just interesting that this is something that happens. And like I said, with the sexual assault, I would love to do research and go back, but it's very, it's very difficult. And more than half of the victims miss 5 days or more of work as a result. So it also takes, an effect that way. My co-host and I try to do, every once in a while, one of us has to make a joke, but it's usually a joke about the town. It's not the victim. It's nothing, But we recently recorded about something that's infamous in our town that happened many years ago. And we have friends and acquaintances who knew this young 13-year-old girl who was murdered. And that was really, I felt like we were just constantly plugging away, like how to get, don't let this guy get out of parole, because we were talking about it. So we had to do something good with it. But you do that every day, and I hope you feel good about it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's hard to hear all the stories of people that still need help, that are still going through it, that are trying to get help, and they're not. It's so hard to hear that. But then, if people come to us, we will do our best to anything we can do. We can point people in the right direction. I mean, we're not experts by any means, but we've talked to a lot of people. We've got some good ideas. There's some places that we can send people for help, and
you'll send me a bio or a list, or I'll scavenge it from you so that I can put it in the notes for anyone that might be. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, and it is all on our link tree, on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod, or my personal Instagram, FeatherGirl77, or Jake's Instagram. I think it's Jake D3000.
Isn't it funny, as much time as you spend with him, you can't rattle off his Instagram?
I know, right?
I know, it's okay.
I tag him all the time.
It's details.
It just comes right up. I start typing him in. Jake's the one you're tagging, of course.
I just wanted to real quick mention your other interests, because you're also a casting director, which I didn't know what the fuck that was until I started stalking you. Honestly, it makes sense. I mean,
I didn't know either before I started moved to LA and became one. I really had no idea that was even a thing.
Really? Because one of your articles is I've always wanted to be a casting director. I was like, who the fuck has always wanted to be a casting director?
I really said that. Yeah. No, I growing up in Iowa, I didn't even think that, I don't know how I thought movies were made. I had no idea.
My daughter came home she goes to a performing arts camp. She came home the other day. She's like, I want a manager or an agent. I was like, well, you figure out what the fuck it is. And then I don't know what,
find out what it is and I'll get you one.
Right. I'll Google it or something. But but you've done I was very impressed. Like, so that Paradise City was released on Amazon, you said.
Yep.
And it's got Jake Deptula from, well, I know her from The Sopranos, Boo Boo Stewart, who I know from Twilight. I'm a really classy gal. And then Bella Thorne, who I know from like 8,000 other things.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a very cool premise.
It's super cool. It's one of the cooler things that I've done for sure. I watched it a few times and I advise everyone to watch it. It's on Amazon Prime. The director, Ash Evoldson, he's also the creator. Like, he had this vision, and I was so grateful that he brought me in, and we just like, it was all his vision. Like, we just like made his vision happen, and everyone wanted to be in it. Everyone was excited to be in it. Like, no one said no. Everyone's like, oh, of course, I'll do it for Ash. Like, and it just like happened. It was one of the easiest projects I've probably worked on, and he's one of the easiest people to work for. So, I mean, it was awesome. It was
and
great.
It's basically, I mean, the idea is there's a rock star and a fan, and they bond. I guess, to me, the description I got from IMDb was like, everyone's the same, no matter how much money, like everyone goes through shit, and you can find a way to connect to other people.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and the music in it, well, because Ash owns a record label too. So, I mean, it's like the music is great. It's just a cool thing. And yeah, it's about a band. They have some issues along the way, and it just kind of tells their story, and it's super cool.
That's great. And you've also got River Runs Red, which has got all these hot guys in that. And
yeah, there's Tay Diggs is in that. He's definitely hot. John Cusack. Oh, John Cusack.
That's ages us though. Do you know that? Like, the fact that we still have a thing for him.
It's like, I just want to like look out my window one day, and there he is with the
radio.
I think just saying boombox ages me.
I think it did too. And now, but then I felt stupid for saying radio. So there you go.
I love him. Yeah, that was a little more difficult to work on, but it came out great.
And you have all these things to point to, and you're just super badass, and I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Trying.
Yeah. You're doing
make it in LA.
I mean, from Iowa to, I can't identify Iowa on a map, to be honest, but
yeah, it's tough. My parents are actually visiting right now. They've been here almost 2 months. So
wow.
My life to them is just like this crazy thing. And I'm like, really? I'm just kind of staying home because y'all are here.
Your life to most people must be a crazy thing, because you're kicking ass in all these directions.
Thank you. And
you're doing great. And Jaimie, thank you so much. And I love what you're doing for like victims. And I almost want a better word than victims, because
survive. We call them survivors.
Okay, thank you. I will call them survivors. Because certainly words matter, and they matter. So, and
they are survivors. I mean, they're surviving, or they've survived, usually surviving. Unfortunately, it's an ongoing crime.
But what you and Jake do is extend a hand to pull them up, which is fantastic.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Jaimie. Hold on.
Thanks so much.